Like I said, this was going to be a first timer. Uh, Working our way through some technical difficulties. Lee came up my videographer Lee came up with some great idea, and now I don't even remember what he said. Anyhow, so as we were saying, we really appreciated a bunch of you being with us live at the Quail and Pebble Beach a week to 10 days ago during Monterey Car Week. And so I want to continue with live broadcasts because we had really good luck with you. A bunch of people joined in. Some people subscribed. Very much appreciated. Feel free to subscribe, donate, do whatever. It was really, really good fun, especially out there on the lawn at Pebble Beach prior to the show starting and then interacting with you. And so all of you, thanks so much for joining in. And what I thought I would do, since we were last live with all of you from Monterey Car Week, I would just give you, here are 10 things that really kind of twizzled my stick during Monterey Car Week. And some of them are a little offbeat. Some of them are pretty obvious. But this was just kind of how my week went. So here's my 10 takeaways from Monterey. So the first thing is, as many of you likely know, is Ford showed a car called the Mustang GTD. $300,000 car, looks pretty wild. My take on that car was, this is almost like Group B brought forward 40 years because they threw so much technology at it, the way it looked, this, that, and the other thing. It really kind of had a Group B feel to it. Plus 800 horsepower. That's very much Group B, where they were just maxing everything out. And one thing that was very, very cool and very old school was they went and gave out a press kit. And this we used to get all the time back in the day. One of these days, we might have to do a live stream with just some of the coolest press kits I have, because there's a lot of them. But so it was in this large box. You open the mother up. And then inside it was this brochure. And you can see there's a carbon fiber weave on it and that type of stuff. And it's multi-pages long. And so when we open it up, it's just, this was, there's a bit of a sales pitch in here, a lot of sizzle. Here's what the vehicle's all about. But it was just really, really, really fun to get an old school, an old school brochure on this thing, the Mustang GTD. Again, this was 800 plus horsepower is what they're projecting. And they were saying, this is exactly what the car is going to look like. This isn't, okay, here's a concept. No, this is a real deal. And so this was a really, really, really nice kind of fun old school twist to the whole presentation. There was, Ford was obviously enthused about it. And there was a little bit of hubris saying, okay, we're going to go kick this person's ass and kick that person's ass and this, that, and the other thing. Hopefully it all comes true, because I wish Ford the best on this car. They're saying $300,000 is the price. I don't know the production numbers yet. I'll be doing some digging into it. And at some point, I hope to get behind the wheel. I used to think that, why didn't they, before I saw it, I was wondering, why didn't they just come out with a Shelby name on it? Then when they ran through the technology and they ran through the look and this, that, and the other thing, for me, it was really, like I was saying just a little bit ago, this car was a modern interpretation of the fantastic Group B rally series that was in the early and mid 80s. And then a bunch of real high-tech things like this, where it was just like, okay, here's the most simple of rules. You got to make 200 of them. Oh, other than that, there really aren't any rules. This kind of had the whole flavor of that. So that was really cool. Then something else that I held in my hand, which was just a blast, was I've been working for the last 3 years on this real deep dive book on the history of the Gran Turismo. How did it come about? This, that, and the other thing, focusing on the heyday, basically 1950 to 1980. And one of the very, very cool things, and this probably was the coolest thing, was and I wish I had some of these printed. I just took some down to the lab to get them printed. There was a bunch of slides and color positives like this that we were looking at that are historic photos from the Bertoni archive and elsewhere that I had never seen before. And so the book's going to have this type of art. But just to sit there on the light box and go through it and see all of it was just, and try to interpret what it was just a real, real treasure. Okay. Roy, I see you're asking a question. Any of the Ford GT team involved? That's a really good question. Now I'm reading Roy's comment off of Instagram. They had all the guys there. And in all honesty, I wasn't paying that close of attention. The champagne was good. No, that's not quite true. But yeah, they had a bunch of guys there. And there very likely were some people involved that were involved in the Ford GT team. They were really selective in who were the team members. And I'll be really curious to see where the project goes. It's going to be fun. So back to the old GT. This was a real pleasure. These negatives may have been the coolest thing that I held in my hand. Unless I want to say, and this is where I wish I had a picture ready. And we're going to do a video on this soon. We'll probably do a quick take. And then for those that subscribe, we did a road test on just, oh my God, it's one of the sweetest pieces I've driven, and I can't tell you how long. It was a Ferrari 365 Boxer that was owned by Clint Eastwood back in the day. So the 365 Boxer was Ferrari's first mid-engine 12-cylinder car, and it was actually the first mid-engine, in quotes, Ferrari named a Ferrari because the Dino never had a Ferrari badge on it. That came first. This is the first 12-cylinder mid-engine car that Ferrari did. And this one was owned by Clint Eastwood. It was a Targa. And the reason is Eastwood bought a 365 Boxer, brought it in to the country, and had a gray market conversion. And it was... Should we be I'm looking at Vintage Motion Lifestyle is asking a question. Should we be impressed, though? It seems like the Renault R5 Turbo formula from the 80s. If it is like that, I'm going to be really freaking impressed. And the reason is the R5 Turbo is one of the funnest cars I've ever driven. Oh my God, that thing is just a friggin' blast. But it'll be that on, I can't tell you how many steroids. So there's my take on that. So thanks, Vintage Motion Lifestyle. Thanks for the comment and the query. Anyhow, back to the Clint Eastwood's 365 Boxer. That car was a sweetheart because it was like 14,000, or was it 8,000 miles on it and 14,000 kilometers. But it was low, totally unrestored. Again, we'll have a video on that behind our paywall that'll really give you guys an idea of what that was, because I was just hooting and hollering. It was so much fun bombing around on the Monterey Peninsula with the top down, and it felt like a new car should, because it had been so beautifully maintained by all its previous owners and the current owner especially. And it was just, oh baby. So it was fantastic. And Roy, thank you for thanking me. It's just good fun. I like hanging out with car guys and gals. And whether you're new to the automotive space, or an old timer like this who's been around the block more than once, we're going to have some fun with this as we continue forward. And so the Boxer that 365 Boxer was just a hoot. And it was even better than, and here's another one we'll post something on really soon, was I also had the pleasure of driving. How many of you saw the movie, The Gumball Rally? And there's that marvelous line in there. Also a treasure. So that video is also coming. Yeah, agreed. Favorite. I'm looking at vintage motion lifestyle. Favorite movie. And the great thing about the Gumball Rally is it really captures the essence of how stuff was back in the day. It was just, there was just this lightness and joie de vivre. And as you probably know, and if not, the Gumball Rally was based on the Cannonball Run. And the Cannonball Run was something started by Brock Yates, which was, it was kind of when they started really instigating speed limits, particularly during the oil crisis, and they dropped everything to 55. They wanted to show that you could drive fast, very safely. And so there was this race, just go coast to coast. And the only rule was there was no rules. So that was the Gumball Rally. And it was, it's really captures the essence of the period. And I was so blessed to be able to drive this Daytona Spider. Now I got to go find the 427 Cobra so I can say I've driven them both. Those were some of my best moments. Then what was really interesting was, and of course, Pebble Beach is Pebble Beach. That's the anchor to everything during the week. It's the Grand Dame. It's the world's greatest Concours. That's like playing in the Super Bowl. We'll talk about playing in the Automotive Super Bowl in just a minute. But what was really fascinating was my social media manager, Joey Wint, and I, in the middle of the Quail, which is an event on Friday, limited to like 5,000 tickets. This is what's crazy, is they were trading. So the face value on the tickets is $1,250 or $1,200, whatever it was. But on the secondary market, they were trading $2,000 to $2,500 regularly. So, and then so what you get is this lanyard when you go into the Quail, wrap it around your neck. And then they also give you a wristband. And that was the key, was the wristband was the thing that was getting you in and out. This just has a program inside and some other things. It's actually a very clever design. It's upside down. So when it's hanging around your neck, you're seeing it right side up. Anyhow, so Joey and I went out to the car to drop some stuff off. I wanted to get some things. And we're in the parking lot. And as we come up to the parking lot, there's a dude standing there. And he says, "Do you want to sell your wristbands?" And it's like, what? I've never at any event during the Monterey week had someone ask to buy a wristband to get into an event. That was impressive. And so we, of course, said, no, we're planning on going back in. So thank you very much. Then Joy and I went over to the car and we were hanging out there and gathering up some stuff and just getting off our feet for a little bit when, boom, there were these three guys kind of just floating around observing us. And so we got up to see what these guys were, what was going on here. And they were some younger kids. They said, "Do you want to sell your wristbands?" So here, from one guy at the beginning of the parking lot, now we're way into the parking lot. Boom, here's some cats asking, "Do you want to sell your wristbands?" No, and they were super nice guys, and they were just really excited. They hadn't been before, and so they really wanted to get in. I said, "No, we're going back in." And I just said, out of curiosity, "How much would you pay?" And one of them said, well, we saw on eBay that they were going for $2,000 to $2,500. So right there, we could have sold our wristbands for $4,000. We didn't. We went back into the show. But it was just, I was stunned that the Quail in the past, I'm going to say 5 years, 7 years, has just really grown in stature. It was always one of the premier events of the week. But as seen on the program here, it was the 20th anniversary of the Quail. And I've been there from day one. It's been a blast. It's a bunch of great people working behind the scenes. And what the Quail has done, and for some people, they get repulsed by this. Some people love it. It's this perfect blend of lifestyle and cars. Sir Michael Kadori, who's the man behind the Peninsula Group and Quail Lodge, as he said, his idea was to do like the world's ultimate automotive garden party, where you had the right crowd without. This is pretty funny. Okay, so I'm seeing from YouTube, we've got a guy, Vampire Bear, and this is something we're going to have to that we'll get to in a bit, where someone is saying that someone should have won an award with their white mirror. John Tamarian from We Are Curated. Beautiful car. You will see. Half a point difference between 5 different cars. How do you choose? We're going to get into that. So that's a great comment. Thank you for bringing that up. But we will get into that. Back to the Quail. This is the most coveted ticket. And the reason is, as I was saying, the idea behind it was to make this fabulous garden party related to cars, great cuisine with the right crowd and no crowding. So they limit the attendance, but then it morphed over the years. And one of the big ones was when they started really focusing on modern supercars. And I remember talking with Gordon McCall, who's one of the organizers, when they started going in this supercar direction. And I just said, dude, what are you doing here? Shouldn't we be focusing on the classics, this thing, that thing? And he was basically, yes, we are, but here's why. And then he laid out the future vision and how for the next generation, the modern supercar is really what rings their bell, and with good reason. It's there's so many supercars and all these manufacturers and stuff that have jumped into the space that it's really pretty captivating. And when he laid out his reason, I just looked at him and I said, you know what, you're right. And I was mistaken. Yes. And they have run with that whole idea. And so it's the most beautiful melding of the classics, contemporary supercars, and then also manufacturers have flocked to it. And there's always a number of world debuts done at the Quail, and with good reason, because check writers are there. And there's a lot of people with high influence and this, that, and the other thing. And I'm talking about people with real influence, not just this influencer stuff. The other thing is some of the manufacturers, you can do test drives. You just have to sign up ahead of time. And it's this just osmosis that has happened over a number of years that all of a sudden has turned the Quail into the most coveted ticket during the entire Monterey week. So much so that you have people waiting outside the event, hoping to be able to buy a wristband off of someone so that they can also go in. And what was really interesting was I talked to a bud after the Quail. We were at dinner one night, and he was telling me he was over at Bonham's, and there was someone outside the Bonham's tent, because Bonham's auction is also on is also a Quail Lodge. There was someone over there asking me if they could buy a wristband. So it's really, the Quail has really been an up and comer. So we had the comment about the Lamborghini, this white Lamborghini should have won. And it was really, so for those that don't know, is for the past, since 1989 on and off, I've been a chief class judge at Pebble Beach, and it's been absolutely wonderful. They asked me to oversee the Lamborghini 60th anniversary class this year, and it was one of the toughest classes that I've had. And it was, I had a really good judging team, lots of experience. One was one of the first guy, actually was the first guy that when I was made a chief class judge at Pebble Beach in 1989, I called John Ling, who's owned friggin' everything and owned a restoration shop. So he was one of my judges. Then Steve Maravik is from Arizona. He's got a high-end restoration shop and service shop, and he owns a number of Lamborghinis. He's restored, I can't even tell you how many. He was great. Then another one was a colleague from Italy, Massimo Delbo was my third judge, who has worked a lot with Lamborghini, has access to the company archives. So we had original build sheets and all this, that, and the other thing on the cars, should they have been needed. And we had, there were 5 cars that were within half a point of each other. How do you friggin' choose amongst those? And this was the real tragedy, because why did the white Mira not place? It's because it didn't run the tour. That's the main reason. Then also, it was the one car that just wasn't running well. I mean, it started belching and smoking and this, that, and the other thing, and had a really rough idle. All the other cars, you just fired it up and they ran like a top. But the main reason the white Mira did not place is because it didn't run the tour. And what does that mean? Pebble Beach has this wonderful event called the Pebble Beach Tour, which is held on the Thursday before the Concours. And it's normally like a 40 to 50 mile loop around the peninsula. And it was done for two reasons. This was actually brainstormed with myself. Craig Davis was a guy that was really the instigator of the tour. And the idea was back in the mid to late 90s, everyone thought the cars that were at Pebble Beach were called trailer queens, which meant they were just trailered everywhere and just driven on and off show fields, and that was it, which was not true. The tour was put in place, to show that most of the cars at Pebble Beach are not trailer queens, that they run and drive exceedingly well, and some of the owners do go out and enjoy them. The second reason was not everyone could afford the Pebble Beach ticket price, especially these days, that lives on the Monterey Peninsula. This was the way for the Concours to give back to the peninsula and its residents. That here you could see the cars for free. Plus, there's nothing like seeing these types of pieces of rolling sculpture in motion. Then when the whole thing was organized, we came up with the idea. I actually pushed for it. If you started the tour, you got half a point addition. Then if you ended the tour, you got another half point addition, just to really encourage people to do that, to run the tour. We didn't do that. They just went, if you were in a really close heat and you needed a tiebreaker, a car that ran the tour should get the nod over a car that did not. And this was from anything from third in class up to first in class, the special awards, and even best of show. Actually, no one that's in the competition for best of show, everyone's going to run the tour, just because it has now become such an important part of the whole Pebble Beach experience. And so out of the 5 cars, the 400 GT that was done to the friggin' nines, and the Mira did not run the tour. And because the voting was so close, and after we had totaled up the votes, we were out there on the field for probably 20 minutes just trying to figure out, okay, do we look at the provenance of the car? What about difficulty of the restoration? Where is this car's importance, its impact on Lamborghini and automotive history? We were looking at all, and then just the general elegance. We were looking at so much stuff, trying to figure out a rational way to sort this out. And we eventually had to just go, you know what, guys, we need to go to the tiebreaker. Bang, because we need to get this down to 3 so that now we can try and figure out the order in which they place. And so that's what we did. So, John, if you're out there, lovely friggin' car, drive that mother, for God's sakes. Get it running right. Drive that mother and take it on the tour the next time you go, because that was why you didn't place. And it was the same with just that awesome 400 GT. I see what you're saying here, Mark. It's no, I took it totally the right way. And I'm glad I thought it was fun that you brought up the comment. This is Mark in Ohio was saying, hey, why didn't the car place? Or they kind of wanted to place it. That's the main reason why. But what's great about you bringing this up is this lets me go into a full explanation, because this is the type of stuff you never hear. And I'm telling you how us 4 judges, because I had my 3 class judges and then me as the chief class judge, we tried to figure out this really, really, really freaking difficult equation. So again, we had to go to the tiebreaker, bang, okay, those 2 cars have to go to the wayside. And now we have it down to 3. And how do we determine the order in which they place? And then here again, we once were difficulty of restoration. What about elegance? What about impact on Lamborghini history and automotive history and this, that, and the other thing? And after going around on this for a while, I said, okay, guys, chief judge, the chief class judge is going to make, we're going around on this too much. I now need to set out the rules. When I go to vote for best of show at Pebble Beach in winner's circle, if I'm really stuck between 2 cars, my typical trick is, if I go through all the other stuff and I'm still stuck, On Monday morning, the day after the show, if you went to your garage door and roll it up and you could see one car sitting there, which one would it be? And that was the trick that we used to determine the three cars that placed in the top three. It was the old garage door test. You opened the door on Monday morning after Pebble Beach. What car would you want to most have in the garage? That means it's the most desirable. Therefore, to you, it's best in show. And so for us, boom, right off the top, it was the Mira. Fantastic car. And then the Espada was second. And then this is what was wonderful and also kind of crazy is a Diablo SE in a one-off paint color. It wasn't the traditional purple, was the third place car. Fantastic car because it had, I think, 28,000 kilometers on it. Was basically untouched. We placed that car third. It had some touch-up paintwork done and this, that, and the other thing, which did affect its judging score a bit. But it was a beautiful car. So that was third. And then here's the crazy thing was some people were saying, that car's too friggin' new. What's it doing out there? And I'm like, guys, no, it's not new. It's now 30 years old. But it's nice to see Pebble moving forward in, now letting these newer cars in. There was McLaren on the field, and there was an F1 that placed in a class. So it's nice to see these 1990s cars, and this is what the Quail does better than anyone, is this integration of the classics and the moderns to make just this beautiful, seamless representation of all of automotive history, including up to a number of manufacturers giving new car launches. And so hats off to Pebble for recognizing where new cars are fitting into the equation. I'm really looking forward to seeing where the show goes with the whole thing. It's then something else that was fun so here's our program from Pebble Beach. And they had these classes of these big SSKs and SSKL Mercedes and such that were magnificent. In Winner's Circle, this was great fun. It's probably my favorite thing every year that I do in relation to collector cars is choosing best of show. It's really an honor and a privilege. And there's about 40 of us that get to choose. And you're sitting there looking at these magnificent machines, and the quality of the restoration totally goes out the window because they all won their class, so they've got something going for it. When I went in there, I did a quick lap, and then I bumped into McKeel Haggerty of Haggerty Insurance, and who's a great dude, and he was talking to a couple other judges. And so we had a brief conversation about best of show and what were we thinking, what was catch your eye, blah, blah, blah. And there was this 540K Mercedes there. And so McKeel was kind of looking at that, and I just was like, dude, really nice car. But for me, this other stuff next to it is more spectacular in my opinion. So I'm more likely to vote that way. You make up your decision, I'll make up mine. And so we parted company. And as I did my 3 or 4 laps through Winner's Circle, and by the way, if we'll be putting up some stuff on the journey through Winner's Circle because we did do a live feed, and we'll probably repost that so you guys can see the fun that we were having. I narrowed it down to about 5 cars, and then I made my decision. Which was this magnificent, if I remember correctly, DLA Fagoni Fulaski coachwork, swoopy thing, red, brought by the Mullen Museum, just spectacular. So for best of show at Pebble, they have 3 or 4 nominees every year, and they brought up the 4, and I picked 3 of the 4, which was that Delahaye, one of the SSK/SSKLs. Actually, it might have even been this cover car, if I'm remembering correctly. It was this two-tone thing that was absolutely fantastic. And then what really caught my attention was there was an unrestored 8C Alfa Romeo from around 1932, so an 8C 2300, unrestored. Boy, I really considered that car for best of show because it'd be wonderful to see an unrestored car win best of show. And it's at a future live stream. we'll get into some more stuff on Pebble Beach and something that could have totally changed the entire collector car universe that didn't happen at Pebble Beach that I wish it had, which involved an unrestored car. Anyhow, so when I was looking at these, the 4 that came up, I picked 3 of them. And the best part was the one that I didn't pick was the Mercedes. So, McKeel, if you're watching this, you're welcome for my prescient advice. The one car that did get Best of Show was the one that did not make my finalist. So it really is truly a pleasure, being able to vote on Best of Show. Another thing, you have obviously the Quail, you've got the Motorsports Reunion, the historic car racing out at Laguna Seca, and here's one of the best one of the best kept secrets. If you go the weekend before at Laguna Seca, so you got to get there early to do this, but there is something that is called the prehistorics. Boom, you can get in for free. Guys are out there testing cars, and you just go wander, and you get to see all of a lot of the Monterey Historic Car Racing Show for free if you go the weekend before Pebble Beach. It's wonderful. I went out there. We've been posting some reels of some things that were there. We're going to post a lot more reels that were shot out at the prehistorics, and I hope you enjoy them. So all of you, looking at you over on Instagram, thanks so much for giving us the wave, and it's much appreciated. But the other big thing that's a huge draw is the auctions, because it's the high point of the year. Not only it's the highest volume, it's the most auctions in one place, normally the greatest number of cars. It's pretty freaking nutty because you're just running around all over the place. So how do you do it? It took me a long time to learn this trick. You don't go to everything. You just pick and choose what you want to go to. I did see most of the auctions, at least in terms of a preview. And looking at some stuff while I was there, and then looking at what people were talking about afterwards, and reading, like with Haggerty and Kidston's K500.com. Great service, by the way. Both Haggerty and Kidston give you really good insight into stuff. And I do use them to bolster my knowledge. But that, and then talking to guys in my grapevine and seeing what I saw and this, that, and the other thing, was around 400 million worth of cars sold this year, which was around 15% less than the previous year. And so it's just like, ooh, is the car market down, or this, that, or the other thing? Okay, so Mark in Ohio is asking me, how do you think Amelia Island compares to Monterey? There is no comparison. It just cutting through the mustard, Mark. There is no comparison, because they are two entirely different things. Amelia is much more casual and fun. Monterey is much more serious, and there's so much more stuff going on. They both have their own unique flavor. I would highly encourage you to go to both. And then the other event that I would put in there, well, actually, there's a number of events, but if you ever get the chance to go to the Villa d'Este, do it. That's just an unbelievable concours, and it has its own different, unique flavor. So going back to auctions, there was around 400 million sold, which was down about 15% from the year before. People are saying, ooh, the market's now seeming to soften. Haggerty, for basically more than a year now, has been talking about a softening of the market. I have seen that, in various pockets. You see it here and there. I have made a long-term call that hasn't happened, where I think at some point the supercar market will implode, because it will collapse under its own weight, because so much of it has been brought about by funny money, which will be a recurring theme on these live broadcasts. So Haggerty had talked about, they started seeing this trend of softening in the market. And then looking at my cheat sheet over here, it was, Simon Kidston and Steve Wakefield on K500.com are pointing to that they thought there were too many, in quotes, common cars, which is kind of fun when you're talking about 300 SLs and F40s and that type of stuff. But in a way, they're right, because both of those had 4-digit production numbers. And it's not the super rare stuff like a Nart Spider, a Ferrari Nart Spider, of which there were 10, or some of the one-off custom coachwork things and that type of stuff. And even the 412P, of which single digits were made. and we'll talk about that car in just a second, is, so that was one thing, that there were too many cars. Then what else is interesting is, where you see the changing of tastes, where there was, I don't know who bought the McQueen 4Cam for 10 million and change like 9, 10 years ago. And it got, I think, a bit over 5. I mean, that dude took a 45% haircut in a number of years. Holy Toledo, I hope the guy went out and drove it and had fun. And then there was another car that was pre-war that the guy wanted 7, and it gradually came down over the years, and it ended up selling at Monterey for 1.5. Oops. So you are seeing some of that, so in that way you are seeing a softening of the market. But I think there's another thing that has caused the market to change, and why there may have been a pullback in prices. Yes, there were probably too many cars. Yes, there's probably too many auctions, and so people get spread thin and so on. But the one thing that no one was talking about, and particularly if we compare it to Haggerty's time frame, is it's been a slight return to what I'm calling real money. Meaning, if I go to the bank right now, I can get over 5% just going to the bank and putting my money into some short-term bills. For the last 15 years, 17 years, that hasn't been possible. This is how it used to be prior to 2008, before the Fed got involved and started manipulating so many things with money and interest rates. You could go to the bank, get 4 to 5% in a savings account. That made you think, because here was a risk-free 4 to 5%, FDIC guaranteed. It's in a bank. It's as safe as it gets, and you got a reasonable rate of return. Now, for the first time in 15 years, we are seeing that again. It's crazy, because you have this inverse where short-term money is paying more than long-term money. I don't get that. That to me makes no sense, because there's theoretically more risk with long-term money, so therefore it should pay you a higher rate of return. It's not doing that right now. My opinion. I think this is one of the big reasons why we saw a pullback. Is there's more risk. And with risk-free, you can get a reasonable rate of return. 5% on risk-free is a pretty darn good rate of return these days. The second thing is, there was this multi-year period of where if you had any wealth at all, banks would just literally hand you money. I mean, it was freaking crazy what was going on with interest rates, because there was no, in quotes, true price discovery. It was just the Fed and other central banks and such were manipulating interest rates. I mean, over in Europe, you could get a negative interest loan. That makes no sense. It makes no sense, where they're paying you to take the money. That doesn't compute. So with cars, for years and years and years, I mean, I had buds that were telling me that were curators of big collections, where they you could get money offered. It was like, how much do you want? And you were paying 1%. That was basically free. And so guys just went out and bought cars, because you weren't paying anything to go out and own these things. And we had a nice bull run in cars. And so they were making money with very little risk and very little capital, because when you're paying 1% on a $10 million loan or a $50 million line of credit, and those are no exaggerations on the numbers, those were real numbers of what guys were being offered. Your carrying cost was basically zero. And it was a great way to expand collections. And so now that to go borrow, that doesn't exist anymore. Now you're paying a much higher percentage, 5% or whatever the working number is now. It's making people stop and think. And so I think that's that might even be the biggest influence of why things were down in Monterey. It was just starting to be a return to, in quotes, normal, sort of, in terms of interest rates and the cost of money. I'd be real curious to hear what all of you think out there. Whichever platform you're looking at us on, please leave us your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to see what you guys have to say. So that was again, that it took the week to be able to see those type of trends start playing out. So one of the fun things I do is I go looking for what are interesting cars that people may not be recognizing at auction during the auctions. Uh, and there was one that really caught my eye was at Broad Arrow. They had a 1934 Cadillac. I forget what the exact model was, with a V16 engine, and it was an aerodynamic coupe. The prototype of that car was shown at the 1933 World's Fair. And it was this incredible amalgamation of Cadillac's most advanced platform, a V16 engine. Very, very few cars in automotive history have had 16-cylinder engines. Custom coachwork that was playing off of two trends, Art Deco and streamlining. And out came this magnificent car. Looking at Broad Arrow's estimate, it was high six figures. Why did that catch my eye? Because this car, when you look at its provenance, its looks, the rarity of it, I think they made 7 of them or something like that, or it was 7 made. If anybody knows, please let us know in the comments on how many of the Cadillac aerodynamic coupes were made. If you're a big boy and you want to go play for major awards at any show in the world, anywhere, let alone get invited to any show anywhere in the world, this was your ticket. So if you could buy it for under $1 million, it basically it ended up going for $940,000 all in, meaning hammer price and then the commission on top. So $940 to restore that car, $500,000 to $1 million. I was talking to a couple highly regarded Cadillac restorers that were floating around, and they were saying, yeah, 500 to $1 million would have been a real number to restore it. So you could be contending for any major award at any car show anywhere in the world, including best of show at any car show, for $2 million or less. Normally, the stuff that's contending for best of show is multiples above that. Whoever bought that, that was a great buy. I actually got a call up, Bud, because I talked to 3 guys trying to get someone to step up to it. And the one guy that ended up being most interested, I haven't spoken to him afterwards to see if he did indeed get it. So that V16 1934 Cadillac aerodynamic coupe was just a fantastic piece of rolling sculpture and a shoo-in to get you into any show, and a contender for major awards, including best of show at any Concours in the world. Another car at Broad Arrow, just coincidentally, that really twizzled my stick was in his Dara. And I don't even know if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, Imperator, of which they made maybe 20 or 30. Just a smoking cool car modeled after Mercedes C111 that was a series of show cars that were done from about 1969 through the 1970s. And so this guy, Eberhard Schultz, thought, boy, what would one of those been like if it had actually gone into production? So he made one at an outfit called B&B, and it was on the cover, Road and Track 1979, 1980. Mid-engine, V8, gullwing doors, wedge design, very cool piece. Then Schultz broke off from B&B and started his Dara. And he did the Imperator and then the I-16 or the 16i, which was basically a Barchetta that used a smaller engine, mid-engine, no top. And that was kind of a cool piece. And then a real grand dame was the Commendatore, which they only made one that had a V12, Mercedes V12, 6-speed transmission. I was blessed to drive it. Thank you, Philip Serafin, the owner, for the pleasure of doing that. One of the coolest cars I've ever driven, and maybe the coolest car of the 90s, just when you see all the trends that were thrown into that car. And that's something we'll dive into that on a future live stream. I can pull up some pictures and all that when I get technology figured out. And that's why we have people, thankfully. So, so this is Isdara, and I don't think the Isdara is sold. But I remember that when Road and Track would do their top speed shootouts in the mid and late 80s, the Isdara was always in there. And it was highly, highly, highly regarded. Phil Hill and Paul Frere, 2 guys that won them all, and Phil Hill also being an F1 champion. They ranted and raved about how well the Isdera drove, saying it was more stable than Lambos and Ferraris and even Porsches and this, that, and the other thing. Those are beautifully engineered cars. And I can certainly attest to that, having driven the Commendatore. I think I'll probably give this thing a bit of a wrap up now. We've been going on for a bit. I really appreciate all of you joining in. Be sure to subscribe. Give us likes. Let us know what you're thinking in the comments on all our platforms. This was interesting because this is the first time this has happened for me, and it's strange because here I'm talking about Broad Arrow, and Gooding and RM had great auctions. We may dive into those in the near future because there was some interesting stuff at those two auctions. And also there was the 412P which was the big boy car at Bottoms. That car brought $30 million on one bid. What's interesting is my grapevine was telling me that there had been one great car collector had gone to the owner of the car and had offered him $30 million twice, and he had turned it down. So that car had been quietly on the market, and then it ended up selling, and not even to the guy that put the $30 million bid. If what I was told was correct, it went to someone else. The $30 million bid prior to Monterey week, it went to someone else. Boom, he bought it, and you've got a great piece. I mean, that's a real A-list car, and just a sensational piece of Ferrari and automotive history. It's so what for me, probably the wildest thing was at Broad Arrow is I had an Iso Grifo back that I brought into the country in the late 70s, early 80s, chassis number 121. There I am looking at the preview. Bang, there's my old Grifo for sale. First time I've seen that at an auction was something that I owned a number of years ago. And it was, here's what's great about that car. I brought it out of Europe, brought it into the country. Chassis number 121, Iso Grifo. Isos are fantastic because it was made originally with a Corvette engine, Corvette running gear for most of them. And this is something that's come out in the research of the book that I was talking about at the beginning of the broadcast. Realistically, in the classic car period, the classic GT period, the Grifo was the best developed of all. And I can lay it out. The chapter I'm writing right now actually lays out a real good case study on why that is, comparing it to the other GTs that were its contemporaries. But in the 1980s, I used that thing as my daily driver every day in the Bay Area when I lived up there. Every day, summer, never overheated, was fine in traffic, could go out and have a blast. It was great for whaling between Northern and Southern California. First time I've seen one of my own cars at an auction. And I think I paid $9-10 grand for it back in the day. Bang, hammer price, $380,000, which to me reaffirmed that there's been this kind of stealth run in Grifo prices that hasn't brought a lot of attention. Because when I went and looked at the car, I mean, somebody had a good base car, but man, that car sure wasn't like I remember it. I mean, the interior had been reworked where there was now inserts in the seats and the shifter was different. The steering wheel might have even been changed. I'd have to go back and look at some of my old pictures. But I was really expecting something a little nicer than what I saw. But it was great to see that old friend. Grifos are great cars. But that was fun. First time that's happened, like I said, there was something I owned back in the day, and now here it was going across the auction block. So whoever you are that bought it out there, have a great time with that car, and you can reach me on all my social media platforms should you want to know anything about my time with the car. And I think on that, we'll call it a wrap. We'll be coming back next week. Lee, you're available to give me some help next week? Please give me the thumbs up in the background. So for everyone tuning in, thanks again so much. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to hit the like button. And be sure to give us your comments. And if there's topics that you want us to dive into, please let us know. So thanks so much. And we will see you next week.